In the world of coffee, there's a journey that every coffee lover should do. The journey to origin. We know it's not always easy to make the trip, so we created the next best thing, the Colombian Coffee Hub. An online site where you will meet the growers and learn some of their secrets, challenges, and successes. See breathtaking landscapes of the Colombian geography. Learn from coffee scientists, industry members, baristas, and coffee growers about what it takes to produce a high-quality coffee, and share your own coffee stories. Now you know. There's a journey waiting for you. Welcome to the Colombian Coffee Hub.
All right, they're trading espressos. Let's talk about these. Let's talk about extraction.
That was difficult.
That was here.
I have got used to using scales.
Oh, really?
So I am chasing a certain ratio, and to just do it by eye again,
Right.
and taste was good.
It was a challenge for you.
It's a challenge.
I think
it's testing.
Well, scales have really changed in the last 12, 18 months how we brew espresso. I think.
Definitely. Yeah. When I'm not using scales in a shop, I'm probably 60 to 70% serving the quality that I want the customer to receive. But with scales, I'm about 90% consistent.
So I'm going to go straight off into a question here because it's one that, we've got Navona Simnelli released a machine at this show that have scales built in. There's some other manufacturers who released
I wasn't
as well.
pushing anything.
No, but do you think that will find its way into competition?
I don't know. What I like about this is this hasn't come from the machine manufacturers. This has come from the bars. This has come from baristas that are looking for consistency.
It's come from breaking lots of scales and
breaking lots of
waterproof.
scales.
Pete, hey, do you think this may make it into barista competition and actually scales will be allowed?
On a machine? Well, right now it's allowed if you bring your own scales and you do that on the tray right now. I think that it would probably be a decision the next time they go up for vote on the espresso machine if a manufacturer has that technology, if they decide to do it. I think one of the biggest downfalls of scales is relying too much on them. And we still have to, and Willem has a specific target that he wants to hit and he wants to serve. And it's clear that he's tasting that coffee and he's knowing that this is exactly what I'm wanting and this is exactly why. But I think one of the things that happens is people learn that I need to weigh it and this is the weight I need to get. But then they're not letting their tongues and their palates be their guide to say, is this the right thing to do?
Absolutely. I definitely think that taste is paramount. I think as an entry-level barista, you can just put on a machine and say, put 18 grams in, 33 grams out, within 28 to 33 seconds.
Yeah.
And you can leave them do it.
Right.
And you can get on with tasting and then bring them up to your level.
And let's continue this conversation, but let's add another voice here from a different hemisphere who may have a different opinion. I'd like to welcome up Matt Perger from Australia, another barista champion, who's going to join us for this conversation. Would you grab that?
You're making me feel old school.
So now we've been talking about scales use in preparing espresso up to now, but there may be some people who don't know what we're talking about. Matt, could you explain a little bit how we might use how a barista might use a scale in the process of preparing espresso?
Yep, it's just the same as making a cake. It's a recipe. You have so many grams of ingredients go in, and so much cake comes out the other end. So we measure the amount of coffee that we put in the amount of ground coffee that we put in the basket of the machine, and then when the espresso comes out of the handle, we're also measuring the weight of the espresso liquid, and then we can express that as a ratio, or we can express that as a formula, and then that helps us to communicate the way that we're brewing our espresso coffee.
And what do you think? Do you use a scale in your daily practice?
I can't make coffee without scales.
Is that right?
Yes.
I mean, Matt, you very interestingly, one at the Tamper Tantrum talk in Vienna, talked about volumetrics. Is this about removing the variables out of there so you can actually concentrate on doing a good job at the machine?
I think the less we have to focus on making the coffee, the more customer service we can provide, which is long lost art in specialty coffee at the moment.
Sure.
Yeah, and that's interesting that you mentioned that. I mean, you could see, you watched this little thing go down, and you could see that that I think Pete broke the mold first, and then Willem followed. And actually, in this environment, we were like using a server to bust the drinks to the thing, but then the baristas wanted to break through that and get to where that they were actually doing the customer service, making the eye contact. That's a really critical part of this whole thing that we need to remember, right?
Coffee tastes better if it's served by someone who's courteous and well-informed and friendly, I guess.
Yeah.
I think
It's
friendly
about
is
the
a good word.
experience.
Yeah. And that's something I think that's really changed in barista competitions over the past decade is the baristas have every year just gotten more and more polished in terms of their presentation and their interaction with the judges, focusing less on the technicalities of brewing coffee and more on the more nuance and atmosphere creation.
Do you think that's changed a little bit because in the previous times the judges had to keep their poker face where they were there going, whereas now you can actually have an interaction and there's more of a, there's a returning smile or a giggle or a laugh and that's okay?
I've been doing some judging, and I get told off for not smiling enough because I'm concentrating on what they're doing, and I get this like smile.
But you know what's funny coming from my position, because I started when you had to have the poker face, right? And so it's always been a little off-putting and a little awkward because you have this person who's just
Right.
staring at you, and that's not a normal interaction with a person. If it is, then something's wrong. And the change to have the judges now smiling and actually
I mean, as Matt says, it's important to have somebody who's courteous and informed, serving it, but it's nice to have some reaction and gauge how you're doing there. Are you engaging them?
It's good to have someone, actually make you feel a little more comfortable by even just being supportive by not looking stern is helpful. But the first time going from the poker face to now actually showing emotion was actually a little disturbing to me. I was a little worried that something was wrong because they're all smiling at me and maybe they're laughing about something. But no, I think it's definitely affected the focus and how we can give that service and that presentation in the WBC format.
So we can't get you up here without talking about grinders, because I think this year you did something fairly different in competition with grinders. So
Safe to say.
I think it kind of created a little bit of interest. So I'm really interested to find out, because I never got a chance to talk to you in Melbourne about this, what sparked that as an idea, and how did you get to it being on your bench in competition?
It started in Brewers Cup. I was hunting for more extraction.
Brewers Cup champion 2012, by the way, as well. So round of applause for that one. Woo.
I knew that coffee was tasting better at high extraction, and I could never get it with espresso. I think that's a common theme among baristas, is not being able to get what they want out of espresso, and we're getting there. And that hunt led me to try a grinder like the Malkönig EK43, which is what I used, and we achieved more extraction with that grinder than we could with anything else, which means that we could get more sweetness and we could get more aroma and we could roast lighter without sacrificing body and mouthfeel and sweetness. And moving towards that, we decided to do it for competition. We learned that we had much more control, which meant that I could make my entire routine coffee only, which was a big step, and it all just fell into place. It was amazing.
So you're saying that it gives you more stability, it's giving you more repeatability. Why do you think it's doing that? What's happening in that grinder that isn't happening in other grinders?
It's pass-through grinder. So if you pour 20 grams of coffee in the top, you get 20 grams of coffee out the bottom, which is very important for consistency. Whereas with grinders where the coffee is flowing through like a hose sort of mechanism, there's a little bit of inaccuracy with what's coming out the end and a bit of regrinding and stuff like that. So that's the first thing. The next thing is the way that Burrs, the way the grinder was made was to aim for what's called unimodal grind particle distribution, which is a mouthful. But it pretty much means that all the coffee grinds are the same size or aiming to be the same size, whereas for most espresso grinders you have what's called a bimodal grind size, which is there's a lot of the slightly larger grinds and then a fair amount of the very, very small grinds. But with this grinder, because they're all so even, you can get a much higher extraction before you get bitterness, you don't get dryness, and you can play around a lot more with your coffee.
And I think that's really interesting to start thinking about these things at that level of technicality, because it's easy to forget, particularly for people that are on the receiving end of coffee, which is that it's about extraction. It's about taking a certain amount of stuff,
It's hot water in coffee.
out of a plant. That's right. And you use water to extract some other stuff from coffee. And that puts some of the stuff in the coffee and it leaves some of the other stuff behind in the grounds. And the balance between those two things are what extraction is all about, and it's what being a barista is all about. And maximizing control over that is exactly what you're talking about.
So something else big happened in Melbourne that this guy kind of went up there and shone like a star and won the competition. How has that changed your life? Because you're the most recent champion, and it's, 4 months?
May, so about 5 months or so now.
So what's happened to your life in the past 5 months that wasn't happening before winning the championships?
Well, I'm flying around the world a lot more, which is kind of a byproduct of winning the WBC. I have a lot more focus on, reaching out, working with other companies, doing a lot of, educational things, more seminars. I hadn't really put a lot of seminars together, PowerPoints, things like that. I'm definitely doing a lot more of that, and really kind of, I guess telling the story of myself, but also a lot of the perspective of the education and the understanding of coffee that I've learned over the years, doing that and being able to give that to other people and actually, translate that to other places around the world. It's really, really fantastic. Yeah. And get to see this guy at a few places. Really awesome.
We're trailing each other at the moment.
Yeah. I'll see you again. It'll happen.
So, what impact did the WBC coming to Melbourne have? Like afterwards, was there?
For Melbourne?
Yes. I mean, it was already a very developed market. I think we know that.
Yeah, it was already very cocky. I think now it's a little bit more self-assured. But I think it wasn't, the specialty coffee people didn't change, but I think the public and the customers started to realize that it was a thing. And that's the biggest change. We already knew that it was a thing.
When I was talking to people who were, customers of coffee shops or interested, they're going, yeah, everywhere's this good, isn't it? And I was like, oh,
no, you
it's
are
really
spoiled.
good. Yes. Yeah, and they're very, very blessed with what's happening there.
So you're saying the barista competition actually had an effect on the general public. This wasn't just a phenomenon for the specialty coffee community, but it actually dribbled out into the general public.
There was some seepage into the general public in a very good way. A lot more people realized, there is such a thing as a barista competition.
Right.
There is such a thing as the WBC and the associated show, and a lot of people visited. There were tens of thousands of visitors.
Just because I've never seen so many consumers at a barista competition than in Melbourne.
Right.
And
it was big.
People came up to me afterwards because I'd been wearing a silly red suit and were just saying that they didn't realise that stuff happened. But
the red suit or the shirt?
Yeah, the red, both.
Oh.
So, Gwilym, you seem to have been around forever.
Thank you.
Yeah, old man. I've been around longer. But you you kind of burst onto the scene in 2009 in barista competition terms.
Well-
You'd been working in coffee for a long time before. Tell us a little bit about how you started and how you got to a WBC final and winning it first time.
I didn't know there was a barista competition. I knew nothing about it. I was one of these people that was happily making coffee and loving it, loving coffee, really enjoying it. But there was this other world that I didn't know about that these people in Melbourne have discovered. And then suddenly James Hoffman, Annette, and Stephen Morrissey, who were quite well known in the coffee world, appeared in my part of London, sort of 1 mile down the road. And all these coffee people appeared from around the world, and there was different sorts of coffees, and it exposed me. And so I started competing because I thought I was quite good. But everybody's customers always tell them they're quite good. And I wanted to test myself against others. And I also wanted to find this bigger coffee world that I'd seen glimpses of and get involved in it and learn. And competition was the way. And first time I competed, I was petrified. I was shaking more than I was during the cappuccinos. And I never wanted to do it again, ever. But I won, and I had to go on to the next stage, and then kept going and going.
So
It was a wheel I couldn't get off. It spat me out at the end.
So, you talk about James and Annette being very influential in what happened in London, and I think we're very blessed in London to have a scene that is as well developed as it was, but it wasn't there
No.
before you and James and Annette and Stephen and these shops started springing up. I know there's people behind it, but what do you think kind of made it catch on? Because a few people being around doesn't start a fire, and it really kind of...
I think there was lots of things around, and sometimes the fire never starts, but there was a lovely little spark, and it started with community and friendship and sharing, and so it's built a very warm, embracing scene that was lovely to be part of.
Yeah. Well, Pete, where you are is another one of those interesting kind of markets. We all represent sort of different kind of markets. Tell us about the coffee scene where you come from.
In Kansas City?
Yeah.
Kansas City is actually a pretty small town in the United States, as far as population is concerned. And actually, when I first started in coffee, 2003, we had maybe 2 or 3, 4 specialty coffee shops, and maybe a few more than that, but they were, here and there. And they were all focused on kind of where everybody was in the 90s with coffee and syrups and really big drinks in the United States, these gigantic things. And it wasn't really moving incredibly quickly. The scene, I was always going out to the coast, I was going to other places and seeing all this really cool stuff. So I was continually trying to improve my skills. But as far as the progression, people going to smaller sizes, going to more simplified drinks, removing syrups from their drink lineup, things like that, didn't really happen out there because we had kind of created this culture for coffee that wasn't about the coffee. It was about all these other things, and so I felt like it was kind of stagnating a little bit, and it wasn't so much that I wanted to get away from the city, but I felt like I was limited in a lot of ways, and that was one of the point where I moved to Hawaii and learned a lot there. 4 years passed, I come back to Kansas City, and the culture and the city itself has grown amazingly. And so now we have not only coffee, but food and beverage has gone really, really great.
Yeah.
And now, we have 10, 15 plus specialty cafes and more that are, they're really focusing on great coffee and just simplified, methods of making coffee, and people embracing more of the Australian style of preparing milk drinks and coffee like that, as opposed to what we've been doing in the United States in the past, which is 12, 16, 20 ounce cup, and how much syrup do you want in it? How much whipped cream on top and sprinkles and whatever else. It's gone to a really, really great place, and so it's one of those cities that it takes time. But when they catch on really well, and they really embrace it. It's never going to be a city that's as progressive and forward-thinking as, some of these ones on the coast, LA and New York and Portland and places like that, and other places around the world. But it's some place that is actually wants to keep up with the rest of the world in some way, shape, or form. So I'm actually really happy to be there and be a part of that coffee culture.
Yeah, that's interesting. And you mentioned coffee culture. I think, and something that you mentioned, Gwilym, is this idea of coffee as a connective, feature. The five of us live in very different places, hundreds or even 1,000 miles apart from each other, but we've got this feature, this connective feature of coffee that runs between us, and this international element is something that we've talked a little bit about. One thing that I was thinking about when I was watching Sonia's presentation is that the barista competitions are very standardized, right? There's very small tolerances for variation on espresso and cappuccino, etc. Extremely tight. But we've already mentioned that, you mentioned Australian style milk drinks. There's a distinct kind of regional style there. In Europe, there's some regional style. So let's talk about the diversity a little bit of styles. Can you explain what he's referring to in terms of the Australian style?
Chinos and lattes. I think the Italian espresso culture in Australia was pretty strong. A lot of migrants from Italy, especially in Melbourne. And I guess that propagated into a very, very strong espresso culture. And Australians generally love milk. There's something about them. We drink hot milk on hot days, cold milk on cold days. I don't understand it, but we love milk. And I guess the coffee culture in Melbourne is for quite small, like 150, 200 mil coffee and milk espresso only, and milk beverages.
Right.
Coffee in Melbourne is espresso. You have to convince someone otherwise.
Right.
If an American usually walks into a cafe in Melbourne and says, "Can I have a coffee?" and we say, "What kind?" and they're stumped. Whereas everywhere else in the world, you just get a coffee. And I think that's one of the big differences. I think 4-5% of our turnover at St. Ali in regards to coffee is filter style drip coffee, and we're pushing hard.
Wow.
To get that 4 to 5%.
That's amazing.
And the baristas love it because it's not lattes and chinos.
Right. Interesting.
So I guess that's what's going on in Melbourne.
And
Oh, sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I noticed in Melbourne that there was a very, very close kind of crossover with food and coffee.
Oh, yes.
Like, it was almost
Yeah.
ingrained that if you went to a coffee shop, you would get amazing food too.
You get bacon and eggs.
Yeah.
Always.
Amazing food, yeah. But it was always well served, well prepared, good, like the experiences I had. Is that important to people from Melbourne, or is that a Melbourne thing or an Australian thing?
It's Australian,
Yeah.
but especially in Melbourne. I think it's one of the only cities in the world where you actually get a convergence of coffee, food, and service at high levels.
Yeah.
Almost every city in the world has one of those three. You can find one of those three things in a cafe anywhere in the world, but the sheer concentration of cafes in Melbourne that have exceptional coffee, food, and service is unmatched.
Yeah.
We're very lucky.
How does that compare in the US markets? I mean, is food an important part in a coffee shop, or is it not so?
Food is always present in the coffee shop. Generally speaking, though, the American focus in a lot of places, not all, and it's always a real treat to find a place that has great food with great coffee. But usually what you find is a place that's a cafe that really focuses on food, and they also have coffee. Or you have a cafe or coffee bar that has really great coffee and also has food. And it's pretty uncommon for them to focus on both really, really well. Typically speaking, the way the model that we go by is really, the budget. You're trying to keep your costs low so you can keep your overhead down and your profits high or whatever. And so a lot of cafes miss the mark. And I think there's some that are starting. They partner with another local place that's doing a really great job with pastry something really simple, and it's nice, but it doesn't have that level of complexity that I saw in Australia.
And in London, Gwilym, is that something that's...
It's starting, and most of the influence is coming from Australia and New Zealand, but still the general quality outside of that is more of the American model. It's a bit of a mismatch there.
I still remember the first time I went to Vancouver and hung out with the boys from Cafe Crema and now Revolver, and they said, we're going to go to the cafe, and I was like, great, and they go, and on Saturday we do brunch, and I was like, cool. Of course, like, duh, it's breakfast at the cafe, and they were like, oh no, we only do brunch on Saturday. It's special. We have a chef. Oh, wow. It's really neat, guys. Well done.
Yeah.
So, what next for you? Because, like, you know, are you going to compete again? Is that something that's in the plans? Is it?
Yes.
Yes.
We had too much fun this year.
Yeah.
We learnt way too much, and I think I'm in a position in my job at St. Eileen Sensory Lab where it's part of the DNA of my role to be the guy that does the competition, not just to win the competition, but to push ourselves to learn something new.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'll be able to do competition next year unless we unearth something and try to break the mold again.
Yeah.
So it's good fun.
And Pete, what are your plans going forward? Like, to use your remaining 5-6 months of being a champion, have you got some set goals you wish to achieve?
Yeah, you know, I have some goals. I'm continuing to work at Parisi Coffee in Kansas City, Missouri, which is the company that's supported me and everything through competition. I think they're a great company and great people. So I still want to fulfill my role with them. Also, by the end of this, you know, kind of championship reign, you know, I want to have some other business opportunities that I have rolling and moving forward by the end of it, because you know it's at the end of that, it's time obviously for the next champion to come along and to have their time in the sun, and so I want to have my own you know, opportunities mostly solidified.
Are there any rules against winning twice?
No.
No.
So that leads me on to Gwilym. Nicely segued there. When are you going to compete again, Gwilym?
No, but I don't like it.
I know, but it'd be awesome to see you
Don't know,
compete
I'm going to
again.
compete again in the Ibrick.
You're going to do the Ebrick.
I did it last year. First Ibrick I ever made was on stage.
Very good.
So I reckon there's potential there to make really, really nice coffee.
I love Ebrick coffee, yeah. Very good.
See, everybody sneers at it, but if you could do the same with American filter coffee.
Absolutely.
Most American filter coffee, absolutely terrible, but it can be made amazing.
Absolutely.
Same with the Ibrick.
Ask Colin Harmon about his entry into the Ibrick competition.
It was him that inspired me.
Yeah.
Couldn't do worse than him.
No, you definitely couldn't do worse than Colin.
All right, well, gentlemen, thank you very much for spending some time with us. I really appreciate it. Big hand.
Thank you.
Thank you.